I've been there.
right? Like,
It's like
there
I've
we go.
been drinking water for 20 years. And
Forever.
that time I messed up.
Like fighting your cheek. The hell is that shit?
Oh, I do that. Yep.
All right, welcome in. It's live before lock. We have a juicy slate, 9 games to get to this afternoon. I'm Eytan. More importantly, that's Gundacker in the house. The two of us combined with Tyler producing. And you, if you hit the thumbs up button, we appreciate that. Subscribe as well. Any questions you have for Gun, just throw them out there throughout the show. It's a live before lock, but we will kind of bounce around. And man, it's been a minute since you and I have had a chance to sit down and chat. And I see you're still rocking the Yankees, and you and I now share something in common. You know that, right?
Uh-oh.
Not personally.
Is it that we
I
both
should have
popped the
prefaced that. You're
Angels
right.
or
No,
is
Joe
that-
Girardi.
Okay. See, I'm not as like I liked him, but I know you guys for right reasons did not. So, I don't hate the man. There was times where but we were one game away from the World Series. I don't hate him.
Did he beef with Cashman and everybody else about analytics? I know the game has changed like exponentially since then, but I think honestly, Joe Girardi was done a favor. I don't think this guy wanted to be here anymore, and I don't blame him.
Yeah, I definitely think that is true. But now when he was with the Yankees, he used to have this. They called him Binder Joe. He had this binder, and it had this game plan that was analytically driven. That I always just assumed that he was never really the manager. He was just following the script,
Right?
And and I didn't know. So maybe his success could have been done by anyone, which is probably why they moved on to Aaron Boone, because anyone could have followed the script.
Look, man, I'll trade spots all day with you, your squad, and what I'm dealing with here. I don't even have an MVP healthy. So you at least have an MVP that's healthy and mashing away. But it's good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, man, it's good to be back here. Shout out to the chat. Hit that thumbs up.
Yep.
Funky Saturday. I don't know how this happened, but there's a bunch of games this afternoon, and that's not normal. So we have to crunch a little bit faster. Stuff cranks up in an hour.
Yep. And just looking at that, that's a really good way to kind of intro the slate itself. How much, or maybe there's a different approach when you do have something like this? Because as you alluded to, this is not a normal thing that we have every Saturday, every Sunday, just in general. So when you have 9 games like this jammed up and it's not the nighttime, you have to get in on it earlier in the day. What changes for Gundacker?
There's still crust in my eyes because I woke up 2 hours ago, maybe an hour and a half. But that's about it. I mean, as long as I got confirmed lineups, that's cool. Yep. I guess as a blanket statement, all these games have a little bit more sunlight, so maybe a little bit more hitter friendly. We saw a lot of home runs last night, so maybe that continues today. But as long as we got confirmed lineups, the process is always going to be the process. And this is just what people in California call life, right? The stuff is locking early, and we get the little taste of what they're dealing with.
To be fair, we don't see any crust. So
I just like stood at the sink and gave my face a little whore bath. So
I think it comes with age, but when you start to get a little older, that shit doesn't go away. Like you could sit there in the mirror for like 10 minutes. And my 40-year-old eye crust, brother, just sits there forever. So give you a little glimpse of the future. All right, let's bounce into it. You're right. We got to jam in 9 games here. We'll start in Pittsburgh, look at the pitchers, and then kind of bounce to some stacks as well. So I don't know, just looking at everything across the board here with this matchup, clearly these are both low-cost pitchers. So DK, there may be some P2 options here. FanDuel, there may be a stretch for you.
Yeah, I think on FanDuel, there's no way I get to either one of these guys. And on DraftKings, the SP2 spot, we can be a little bit more lenient with the expectation there. I tend to say as long as I can get double digits out of the SP2 on a modest pitching slate, and this is kind of the pool gets shallow pretty fast. I guess you could justify it, but Zach Davis really doesn't have any redeeming qualities with a sub 18% K rate. And for Contreras, we are dealing with a little bit of the unknown. He's only got 17 innings in the majors this season. I can dig into the minors a little bit, but his last couple starts for the Pirates, he did go 5 innings, less than a strikeout per inning, pretty tame results. However, there's a shot at 3x to maybe 2x on that price tag. So I think you could do worse things than justify him because his underlying metrics are pretty solid, and we know the D-backs can offer a 1-4 strikeout rate as a team. But it wouldn't come with a giant bit of confidence. But I'd be way more likely to put Contreras in the pool than Zach Davies.
Yeah, you're getting positive leverage too with Contreras. Very little ownership, low single digits there. So you may be ahead of that. 5.4 we have projected there for that 1.2% leverage. So you're gaining a little to the field, even if you get a little bit of them, to your point.
Yeah, and leverage is leverage, right? And baseball,
right.
We'll take all the leverage. We'll take what you can get.
All right, let's give them what they want. I already see people wanting the stacks here. So let's start with these two teams specifically, and then we'll kind of bounce around as we do and move from DK to FanDuel, depending on what you like and really what jumps out here. But knowing that with these pitchers, as you mentioned, you're not really getting to a lot. If it's Contreras, Davies, the same. How does that change with the stack? Arizona, you are getting some positive leverage here against Contreras. Neither of these guys, it looks like you're getting to a lot that's going to prevent you from getting to either of these stacks. Pittsburgh, you are losing a little bit because of the value that they have, and the ownership is a little bit higher than Arizona.
Yeah, a little bit. Pittsburgh is very uninspiring. Davies, although really, really not great and a big contact guy, that you don't get a lot of power out of these Pirates bats. Just Brian Reynolds since the beginning of last year with a 200 plus ISO. Yu Chang, I guess, is in that conversation as well. But this entire team outside of Brian Reynolds has a negative WRC plus against righty. So you're never going to feel great here. But I guess if you're just betting on bad hitting beat and bad pitching, there's a path to success there, and the ownership on the Pirates is likely never going to get at an egregious amount where you can't sacrifice 5% of a 150 or even 3%, something like that. But in like 50 or less or 20 or less, I think both teams are mostly expendable. Definitely on the onslaught stack lineup build, I think I'd be more cherry picking this spot or this game for talent. And I think the D-backs have a little bit more polished talent with more group upside. So I'd be way more privy to a D-back stack than a Pirate stack.
Are you looking to maybe minimize, and if it's on DK or maybe even on FanDuel, not getting to the 5 or the 4 as much with Arizona? And maybe this is more of a 2 or 3 man, or does that not matter for the D-backs as much?
I think it's the opposite. I think I would be there on a full D-back stack, but I wouldn't want 4 or 5 Pirates.
Yeah, that totally okay with that. Let's go to Baltimore. All right, so the Orioles hosting Cleveland. Low projected run totals here. Guardians just over 4 there, but Baltimore, it's kind of more the same with that 3.9. So we've got McKenzie and Wells here, and depending on where we look as far as our own projections, you can kind of mix and match a little bit. Wells is going to be, again, that P2 super low-cost option. And then you have McKenzie, who you're going to pay up probably more in that mid to maybe bottom top-tier range. But you're getting a little leverage, some pretty good positive leverage with McKenzie.
Yeah, and we know historically McKenzie, battles with command, and the plus side to him is he typically gives us good strikeout potential. This year he hasn't really realized the same strikeout rates that he saw last year, but as a pushback though, his walk rate to righties has gone from almost 12% down to 5%. Is that going to sustain going forward? We'll see. I do think he's a really great example of a risk reward guy, and I think that his ownership is a little bit lower than I expected. I really thought a lot of people would be on him at 8.3 on DK at 13%. Yeah, you're like you said, we're getting a little bit of positive leverage because we know the Orioles can offer some strikeouts. And in this confirmed lineup, once we get past Austin Hayes, Mountcastle, Odor, Urias, Chirinos, and Jorge Mateo all strike out about an aggregate of 27+% since the beginning of last year to righty. So it's a really positive strikeout spot for him, and he might even get a little bit of help with that left field playing way more for pitchers this season. So I think 8,300 is a soft enough price point to get there. This is the ultimate Scumdacker spot, I think, on both sides. Really for McKenzie, because I will be in on some Orioles stacks, but McKenzie, I think we could all concede that there's a decent range of outcomes for him to be a strikeout per inning plus and maybe get through 5 or 6. And at 8,300, he has a real chance at 20 plus fantasy points.
9,400 on FanDuel. He does bump up, though, as now our third projected top pitcher on the site. The leverage actually increases because logically you're paying more, so people are going to stay away from him. But to your point, if that number is doable, look, it's not going to be as soft as what we saw in DK. But if that 9,400 is swallowable, if I can use that term there, the leverage is through the roof, and you're really gaining positive leverage over 4 to 5 other of the top projected pitchers. So it's a little bit of a stretch. I get it at the 9,400, but I'm just curious how much that changes for you on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, more leverage is a more positive thing for your tournament strategy. So it makes sense to be a little bit more intrigued. Obviously, with FanDuel, we really weight the quality starting to win a little bit more. But I think, it's very doable for him to achieve that here. And, you look at his last couple of games, he's been able to get through 7+ innings in 3 games straight. And then he's got you 6+ innings in 5 games straight. So quality start very much on the board. He's giving you 6 straight of those. And then they are slightly implied for the win. So I think he's a fine FanDuel play. And I might even, I might have some historical bias that's not as happy to play Tristan McKenzie, but he's been rock solid for him. Yeah.
Look, let's flip it to the bats here. Let's go after McKenzie, see how much. You mentioned that this is a spot, right, for you. The scum, that's your term, so I'm just repeating it here. You've coined that. I love it. But Baltimore, you can get to a little Baltimore here, and that's not going to hurt, I think, you getting to as much McKenzie as you laid on both sides.
Yeah, and the reason being is because I do think there's some home run regression coming for McKenzie. Looking at his batted ball data, he's got a 50+% fly ball rate to lefties and a 50% fly ball rate to righties and a 23% line drive rate to righties. And last year, he had a 1.8 home run per 9 to righties, a 1.3 to lefties, and there's not really a significant difference in batted ball data, so kind of bank on those numbers kind of normalizing a little bit. So I think he might be a little bit on the lucky side when it comes to home runs allowed right now. So because of that, I'm willing to maybe jump on them and maybe hope that a team like the Orioles might be able to be pesky enough at a decent enough ownership. I was looking at the ownership projection on Baltimore at 3%. I mean, that's right in line with our percentage of them being a top stack. And if you have that little hunch and if you're invested a little bit more than the field on McKenzie, you can kind of hedge the field and get to like 6% of those Orioles stacks and just really have all your T's dotted and your I's crossed.
Cleveland, Wells is only 1% projected as far as ownership. So you're not destroying the field or anything. You can do a little damage depending on if that number jumps up a little bit that we have projected for McKenzie in that mid-teens range. So this is all just about getting to Wells and really using a Cleveland stack that is decently projected, a little bit of a negative leverage score, but it's pretty much flat right there. Also decently projected like Baltimore, but just a couple of percentage points higher. That same range, but it looks like you could work with Cleveland a little bit more.
Yeah, the thing with Cleveland is I don't feel like they're as spread out, kind of like the Pirates situation. And I felt this way yesterday. It's like it's Jose Ramirez, and then you can grab like Owen Miller, Josh Naylor, and that's exactly what you could have done yesterday. The rest of the lineup doesn't give you a lot of high hopes for power. There's only Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez against righties have sustained a 200+ ISO. J-Ram a 300+ ISO since against the beginning of last year since righties. So there's not a ton of power, and that's really what we want to go after in baseball for DFS. And so this might be one of those 3-man stack opportunities, maybe 2-mans instead of going full-fledged 5. But I definitely wouldn't talk anyone off of trying to pick on Tyler Wells here. To his credit, he has been a little bit better against lefties with a 3.58 xFIP, but against righties that rises dramatically. dramatically, and he's only got about a 13% K rate to righty. So maybe a little bit more hope for multi-hits for the Guardians here, and maybe they get a little aggressive on the bases and try and steal some bags here to make those make them a little better plays. But I tend to not be that enthralled with 5 Guardians in a lineup.
Yeah, I imagine that it's not going to, I mean, really, the numbers don't change drastically enough for either of these squads on FanDuel to really matter much, especially since McKenzie's ownership dipped significantly. So you're not even countering some of that field. So I imagine, I saw you drink it, so I was going to talk through it. So I imagine not much changes, right, for either stack on FanDuel. That's all.
Yeah, it's pretty linear between the two sites, so I would have similar exposure. But I think to your point about Tristan McKenzie, with him having more leverage on FanDuel, I'd kind of be more inclined to get to more of them over there. So I'd probably double hedge it. I don't feel that way here. I maybe a little bit. Maybe I would have a little bit more Orioles just to get a little bit more hedge in my life, just in case he implodes. But yeah, I don't have to go too crazy with differentiating the amount of Guardians exposure I'll have.
Yep, all good, my friend, and nothing wrong with some hedge. You can have a lot of hedge in your life. Texas hosting Seattle. We've got a decent total now here at 9. Also looking at where we have projected for both teams over 4, Rangers closer to 5. So let's look Glenn Otto and then Marco Gonzalez for Seattle. And it's really just a matter, as kind of seems to be the nature of the slate overall, is just trying to deal with cost, right? So if we're looking at Gonzalez, now he's going to be an 8K guy. You are going to be able to work some of that leverage that you see for him there. But, the other side of it might just be Glenn Otto, who's just a little bit cheaper, but you lose a little more leverage.
Yeah, I think this is a spot where I'll let the field have both of these pitchers. I don't really have that much interest. Let's go. Otto with a 19% K rate and a 5.69 expected ERA. Marco with a 5.1 expected ERA and just a 13% K rate. It's really just not enough redeeming qualities for me to feel like I need to shuffle them into the mix here. And I'm more inclined to get to the offenses.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. Yeah, I was just countering that, right? So looking at these are 2 of the top projected stacks that we have, Texas and Seattle. Now, there's a little bit of a gap, right, between the top 3. We'll talk about Houston, Washington, and the Reds. But really, when you look at these 2 teams, this is backing up your point here, which is the majority of the field are looking at attacking these pitchers more so than rostering them. So now it's just a matter of how you're working the negative leverage. You have a little bit more with Texas. And maybe that means you minimize some stacks or you just eat it and kind of get a little bit lower than the 10.9 we have projected.
Yeah, I trust the Mariners lineup a little bit more to give me one more innings. I think you look at this Rangers lineup, it involves like Charlie Culberson. He's a pinch hit risk, and the bottom half of this lineup, Huff, Lowe, Ezekiel Duran, Culberson, Eli White. All those guys definitely have pinch hit risk. So it would lean on 1 through 4 a lot, and they are. There's somebody absent that my brain's missing out on, but that would be the bulk of my interest. So I feel like I can achieve what I want to achieve for the Rangers in a Seager, Garver, a Dallas Garcia. So I don't have to get to like 12% to feel like I have every combo. With the Mariners, though, I think they flatten out a lot better. This entire team outside of Cal Raleigh have a positive WRC plus against righties. And then, Winker, France, JP Crawford, Adam Frazier, and Taylor Trammell all kind of lead the charge in that regard. And, they have a nice mix of low K rate guys, decent hit for average, and a couple pop through the order, like Suarez, Winker, Toro even has recently come back for him. So I think the Mariners are going to cost me more lineups to get the combos that I need than the Rangers. So I'm more inclined to get to more Mariners here, and then Rangers. I feel like we can get away with what we need early and worry about some of these righty masters in the bottom of the lineup getting subbed out. I mean, to get like 1.5 or 2 implied at bats from Charlie Culberson, and then he gets yoinked out of your lineup, that'd be kind of frustrating if you had a sweat going.
Yeah. Oof. I'm trying to see if there was any difference, because you mentioned it's a great term as far as how linear things can be, unless there's a different edge like we found with McKenzie on FanDuel. It doesn't look like I mean, Seattle is gaining a little less, I guess, ownership. So maybe that can help you a little bit more if things stay the same for you on FanDuel.
Yes, I mean lower owned, yeah, it's definitely what you want, especially if you think they're the better spot.
Right.
Otto has been really bad, not really bad, but he's allowed a really high average to righties, and I think regression to lefties, average wise, will come, but he's also walking lefties at a 15% clip. So you're going to allow base traffic with a near 1.4 whip. That's going to create, him pitching out of the stretch a little bit more. And these hits turn into RBI hits, and guys like Julio Rodriguez can hit bombs, can steal bases. There's just a lot of ways for success for the Mariners here that I don't really see as much for the Rangers. With Marco Gonzalez, as bad as he is, for a stack to pay off of him, it's just like hit homers.
Yeah.
He's not, he's throwing strikes and stuff like that. So we really kind of focus on the power guys. And for me, it's like Seager, Garver. I think Mitch Garver has one of my highest bomb ratings. So there's that. And like I said, I can get to him pretty easily, and I can achieve what I need with Rangers exposure with just getting to those guys, because those are the main guys I want access to.
Yep. And then real quick, just because I saw Tony A, lower owned, not low owned, lower owned as opposed to DK. That was kind of the angle that we were looking at. All right. Anything else you want to clean up here with Seattle and Texas, Gun?
No, I don't know if they're popping the lid on that stadium or not. I imagine it's closed, but it's not that hot in Texas, so maybe they opened up the roof and keep an eye on that. I don't know.
Tyler knows. I mean, how big is Texas, right?
Tyler's further from the stadium than I am.
Right. Well, yeah. Because how far are you from there? It's Arlington.
I'm in Waco, so probably like 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tyler,
Gun's like 2 hours, which is where I grew up. Gun lives where I grew up, and then I'm an hour and a half south of Gun. So it's like it probably take me like 3.5 hours to get to the stadium. And yeah, I'm more for like Astros weather updates down here in my area, Eytan.
You guys live in a new country. I'm telling you, like that the size of that state alone.
It used to be a country.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Right. It may want to be its own country. Who knows? All right. So we'll wait on the roof. Anything we can get from that. Let's head to Oakland here. And Red Sox, EMAC, roof is closed today in Texas. So thank you, sir. Let's look at Boston, Oakland. Red Sox coming off that win last night, able to victimize Oakland pitching there. So now when we look at this, as far as what we have projected on our own top pitchers tool, you can look at Blackburn 8,400 and really try to maneuver something there. The cost versus the positive leverage you're going to get, or Nick Pivetta, who has a pretty good matchup, pretty high top 1% as far as what we have projected. But of course, a lot of people are getting to him. So there's going to be some negative leverage to work around.
Yeah, athletics are usually just, hey, why not pitch against them, especially when you catch them in Oakland. I was all over Eovaldi yesterday, but I think Eovaldi is just a good pitcher. Nick Pivetta is going to leave a little bit to be desired. With that said, a 401 Sierra, you could do worse versus an athletics team that has like a 75 WRC plus against righties and a 1-4 K rate. So I absolutely understand the justification there. But once we start getting into really, really bad negative leverage, and him being 11% negative leverage, that's an opportunity to, maybe cut corners, severely undercut, or just look the other way. And I was kind of leaning on just having more like Cease at, the good strikeout guys. So I'm not there at the 25%. I'm probably closer to like 10%. But if that number got any higher between now and lock, I'd be looking to maybe just take a calculated risk and sit that one out. But I understand it. I definitely do. And I think his, 23% K rate, I wish the swing and strike rate was a little bit higher this season, but this is an athletics team that can make, average pitching into good days at the office. I have really no interest in Blackburn to make that a simple analysis, man. He's just a contact pitcher, ground ball guy. He can kind of troll this any offense from having a good power day, but he just doesn't excite me for DFS because of his lack of strikeout upside.
So I just wanted to follow up real quick what you were talking about with Pavetta, and you hit that number you mentioned in that 27, 28 range. Are you just now going to have to significantly lower how much you're getting to him to maybe like cap him at 18, 19%? Or when you say sit this one out, are you truly fading him?
No, if his ownership got to like 40%, like we have a Dylan Cease, then I would have to let the field have that and range of outcome that we saw that the other day with I think Matthew Liberatore. We just got to a ridiculous ownership, and it was just because, hey, he's going against a bad team, and sometimes bad hitting can beat bad pitching. But Pavetta is like right on the cusp of not being terrible. So I don't want to, give up him. And we know the Athletics are terrible. I don't think 25% is enough to sound the alarms just yet, because 25% is really not going to make your lineup a lot less unique than the field because of how many games there are. But with that negative leverage number being 11, that definitely is going to make me far less than the field. Yeah. And I might even be less than our top 2%. I have them capped at 10%. I haven't hit the crunch button yet. I had them capped at 10% before I looked at these numbers. So I don't think I'm going to change that. If anything, like I said, if we refresh in 20 minutes and that 25% ownership spikes up to 30, 35, then I'll start thinking about, full fading him and hoping he doesn't break the slate.
So looking at that now on FanDuel, real quick, before we get to the stacks here, Pavetta, you've got a little less negative leverage to work with. He's right there. I mean, this is a similar situation as we saw with McKenzie, except for the fact that a lot more people are getting to Pavetta and look, there's only a $400 difference. So I imagine that based on what you laid out with McKenzie, you may want to just buck up the extra $400 and play a little bit more McKenzie, especially with that positive leverage. But the point being, Pavetta's leverage and ownership now work a little bit more in your favor on FanDuel than they do on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Flipping. You're saying on FanDuel for
correct. If you went to FanDuel and started to look at Pavetta as opposed to what we had him at that 7,900, you mentioned the 11. I mean, look, negative 11 is up there with Ashby and Cease, what you're getting in that range. FanDuel, on the other hand, it dips significantly because his cost goes up so much, similar to McKenzie. But the point being is that his leverage drops now a ton. Yeah. Negative leverage drops a ton.
Yeah. So, process-wise, you play the numbers there. And to his credit, if you're trying to justify FanDuel, like I said, one of the big factors for me on FanDuel for creating a pool is a guy that can go 6 innings or more, and that's something he's done in five or six straight games, and we've seen his pitch count get up to 112. So he's got plenty of bullets. The walk rate scares me, but yeah, if we're gonna get better numbers over there, if you're playing both sites, then just play the numbers on the site and be less in on Pavetta here, but know that you'll have access to him on the other site. And I think that's the right way to look at it. Leverage is leverage, man. Get it where you get it.
I love it. All right, let's move to the bats here. And you're not getting any Blackburn really at all, right? So that opens up the door for how much you're getting to the guys who are going to blast him in Boston.
Yes and no. The reason I'm not really that enthralled by Blackburn is that I don't expect him to give up a ton of power. That's not to say he can't. He gave up 2 homers in that last game against a pretty decent Astros team. But the reason I don't get to guys like Blackburn is that they're really just contact guys. 19% K rate. It's actually higher than we've known him in years past, but it's still not like insane. And this Red Sox lineup is not. Maybe Jaron Duran has a 36% K rate at the top of the lineup, but I imagine that, he's put there to be a little bit more pesky, maybe try and steal some infield singles, stuff like that. But for the most part, when I fade guys like Blackburn, it's just because I think their average game is like half of their outs being ground ball outs, and then they control hitters that, when we do get runners on, troll hitters with the double play, stuff like that. I think Blackbird's only allowed 3 bombs here. So that park mixed with his ground ball rate is really just, it scares me for Boston. So I'll get to some Boston just because it doesn't cost me much to get there. We have Boston projected at a 3% ownership. that's always way too low for a team like that. But I have modest expectations. But nonetheless, we do get a little bit of positive leverage. So not having to give up much equity in your lineup portfolio is a good to be there and not have to have 15% like some slates.
Yeah, and leverage is leverage, right? So let's test that theory here with Oakland, because on one hand, they are the lowest projected stack on the books today. We have them as the lowest or second lowest, right there, hovering as far as their projected team total. But combo of positive leverage due to low ownership and cheap players. Also, you're knocking out what could be 23. And you mentioned that this number may go higher. Pivetta could be closer to 30% possibly on DK. So if you were interested in Oakland and somehow Oakland shows up in some capacity, this could be a pretty big leverage play, both from stack and against Pivetta.
I mean, yes, the Athletics are probably an incredible leverage play every slate ever. I don't want to, I don't want anyone to be able to cut this up to make me look like I'm touting Athletics here. So, I mean, if you personally are on the side, like anybody out there watching, it's okay to disagree with, Pivetta's looked decent and his results have been great. If you want to be heavy on Pivetta, then maybe you could hedge yourself a little insurance on a couple athletic stacks here. But I'm really not. I'm not there. I don't have any athletic stacks.
Yep. All right, let's go to Tampa then. No need to kick that dead horse. Ray. Now this is the one here. We'll talk about Rasmussen in a second. But Dylan Cease is the lead across the board. He's been referenced as far as some other guys up there at the top where we have projected. But, at 9,600, it doesn't even matter at this point. The ownership is there. And unfortunately, the negative leverage is there as well. So how do you approach Cease across the board here where, if it's FanDuel or DK, he's going to be right there at the top?
Yeah, this one becomes a decision, right? At 44% ownership on DK, we know that his upside is unmatched on this slate. I don't think there's really anyone that has that 30 to 40 outcome as often as he does, just based on the pitcher that he is. With that said, it's been a little bumpy road lately, and he hasn't been a model of consistency. But what he has shown us in his very last game is the ability to go to 100 plus pitches. So that's in his favor. The Tampa Bay Rays on the season have struck out, 25% against righties. They're still without Wander Franco. So there is some strikeouts to be had in this lineup, quite a few. He does get a pretty nice park boost as well. So I think he's one of the, best pitching plays on the slate. But at 40, if half of every lineup out there is going to have exposure to him, that is the most obvious way to be different. So I would probably just process-wise try and undercut that. The thing is, when I try to fill in the cracks here, the pool gets a little bit shallow, although it's not as bad as maybe I thought it was at first glance this morning. There's still some serviceable guys that can patch around, like Mackenzie Gore, Logan Webb, Tristan McKenzie, guys like that. But I just don't know that I'd want to be near half of every lineup having him again. So I'd probably be around 30 to, probably about 30% if I can get away with that. If not, if I have to go a little bit higher just to fill out my lineups, I'll go for it. But I just don't think I need half of my lineups to have Dylan Cease here, and especially if the field's going to have half of their lineups with it. Yep.
You're going to have a much different gap as far as everybody getting to Cease, as far as Rasmussen on the other side of that. You're spending up, but you got a little leverage here to the field. So for a guy who could easily sit, depending on how you're spending, if you wanted to go heavy on pitchers, he could be a P2 here. But for a guy who's probably going to be thrown in there a bunch, depending on where the money is allocated for two pitchers, there's some pretty good room here for a guy that you're spending up and you're still getting. Like, we'll talk about Luis Garcia in a second. I know EMAC mentioned he wants to hear about Garcia from you, but it's more about Rasmussen here and the numbers that you could work in your favor, as opposed to the opposite, right, gun with Cease, where it's like, all right, you now have to scramble just to make him fit in what you're dealing with, your pool.
Rasmussen at 9.4K on DK is such a hard click because we haven't seen that pitch count stretch to 100 plus like we have with others. He's been more modest in the 80 pitch range. And I do feel like, dollars per pitch that's probably the most expensive play on the slate. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about that. When he was, a 7,500 play or something like that, I was a little bit more enthralled here. The White Sox, even though their WRC plus against righties is really low, like 82, they haven't really struck out a ton to righties, just 19%. So for 9,400 to be like an optimal result on a modest pitch count, you'd really need a great game. Yeah. I will say, according to our board, we do get some positive leverage if you want to get there. And that would be, hey, if you didn't want half your lineups to have Dylan Cease, you just got a little bit of money to open up for a guy like Rasmussen. And maybe he does sneak into a 20 fantasy point. And I think if a pitcher gets 20, he has a chance to get you where you need to go. So but I wouldn't want to be above 10% on Rasmussen. But it looks like if we did get to 10%, we'd give us some positive leverage versus the field, about 4% positive leverage.
What's I don't want to say magic number, but what is that magic number for Rasmussen? He drops to 8,700 on FanDuel. I imagine that's still not enough for you, though. Probably low 8K.
Magic number is like price or
yeah, price. Because you mentioned that how 9.4, right? 9.4 was so difficult, and obviously that price is going to jump out. But if it dips, I was just curious to see where it would dip. I mean, $700, so it's not a huge range there. But if that dipped to 8,100. Does that make enough of a difference for you to target Rasmussen on FanDuel?
No, because my checkbox for FanDuel is I want to believe that my pitcher can get 6 innings, and Rasmussen has done that once all year. So, and it's not a knock. I mean, on some slates, a 5-inning FanDuel pitcher that goes nutty with the K's is viable. I think every slate is special, and every slate is subjective when it comes to what you need or want for pitching. But it's hard for me to look at some of the guys that we have on the slate, like even Pivetta for that matter, 100 plus pitches. Those guys that are got a longer leash to get into that 6th inning, get you that shot at the quality start and the win and stuff like that. It's not the end all be all, but for my check boxes, I prefer that. Yep. If this was a smaller slate where the options weren't as robust, I'd be more open to it. But I don't think today I'm doing it. I just haven't really seen it from him.
All right, so let's look at the stacks here. Take a question or two in there. Hit that thumbs up button. As you know, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed here. This is the Odd Shopper channel as well. And you can be checking Odd Shopper every single day. Tons of MLB betting content for you, both ahead of time and also as far as what to bet. So from content to actual what to bet. So Cease, let's look at just targeting Cease here. And it's just so hard to ignore, right, that you have half of the field getting to him. Tampa, though, just not expected to do much against Cease. The leverage is minimal, but it's still there on the positive side. So, I mean, you're down in like the White Sox Marlins range as far as projection for Tampa. I don't know how much of that is with Cease, where you think maybe Tampa can get around it, or if it's just more of a stay away.
It's weird. The way Brian Cash sets this lineup up is so weird. They got Kiermaier leading off, and this is, he's been doing that. I get it. But they have some redeeming bats. Like Randy Arozarena kind of spoiled yesterday. I think he had a 3-run shot. And I think me and Eric were on Davis Mills yesterday, the 4K special, and they imploded on him real quick. But as far as talent, like if you told me G-Man Choi, Randy Arozarena, Mike Zunino, Yandy Diaz or Kiermaier, you told me those guys had, a couple hits and, half of those guys got bombs, I wouldn't be surprised because, they have the ISO, they have the power to do that. So I do think there is some redeeming qualities in this offense getting off. Maybe Cease is not the guy that they would do it on, but if they can work Cease has a 13% walk rate to lefties this season. We've seen him struggle in spots. If they can get him out of the game in 4 innings or 5 innings, this White Sox bullpen has not lived up to to people's expectations. They got 130% walk percentage plus versus the league in terms of bullpen walks. Their hits per nine allowed much higher than league average. Their whip is up there. There is some merit in them getting in on this bullpen, and at that price point in terms of ownership percentage, I don't think you have to give up much to be there. And then, like I said, if you guys are like me, you want that insurance, and you are in on Dylan Cease, it would behoove you to maybe have a couple, 2-3% of race stacks anyway. But if you're also like me, you want to double hedge, undercut and Cease, and then also getting to raise, it makes sense. And I think unlike some of these other stacks, this team still has power, even though it's, strikeout power like Mike Zunino. But when Zunino does make contact, he has a 20% barrel rate. So there's definitely a more logical range of outcomes for success for them than some of these other stacks against aces.
What are you doing with the White Sox here against Rasmussen?
I'm not that interested in them. They're still without Tim Anderson. Having Moncada, Abreu, Luis Robert, Gavin Sheets in a nice little lane there, you could easily justify getting to them. They've just not been they're not that guy, pal, so far against righties. But much like the Rays, you don't have to give up much to be there. So if I can get them at 1.4% ownership, yeah, I'll keep taking the plunge at 2, 3, 4%, something like that. But I got enough respect for Rasmussen and then this bullpen to kind of hold them at bay. But I do think that ownership is probably too low. So I think you have to get there, and it would be 3 through 7 as the main interest for me. But I guess Andrew Vaughn deserves a little bit more notice for what he's done in the last couple of weeks.
All right, so saw Squatch happens with just a general question for you, and we'll hit these last 4 games here before we get out of here as well. And look, just something to think about. Let me throw the question at you, Gun, so you can think on this here. And it's just a simple, your top GPP FanDuel single entry pitcher, your number 1 pitcher, and your top stack that you have for GPP FanDuel single entry. And I would just say this is a really good opportunity here to get depending on the number on BetMGM, to get a no-run first inning, because Tampa has been on fire scoring runs in the first. Everybody loves these new bets now, right? Because you don't have to sit through in a half a game or a full game for a sweat. But Tampa's been on an absolute just on fire right now, on a tear. But Cease on the mound, you would think is enough to kind of settle him. So I'm thinking you probably get a little good number on that one, but just something to throw out there. So Squatch happens for you. Single entry GPP FanDuel. Who's your number 1? Who's Gundacker's number 1 pitcher in top stack?
Man, I feel like I talked into a circle on McKenzie, and you mentioned his ownership being what it is on Fan, or at least the leverage being what it is on FanDuel. I think that makes a lot of sense here. Just to be different and be away from the top of the board. Stack wise, I'm keeping an eye on this Kansas weather.
Yep.
But man, Chris Bubich throwing baseballs has been a pretty profitable thing to pick on. With that said, we have the ownership on the Astros matching their top stacks percentage, but that still leaves the room open for if you got that feeling in your bad knee with the storm brewing, right? Like there's still room for creating your own leverage against that number, if that makes any sense. So probably Houston and McKenzie, but keep an eye on the weather.
All right, let's go to Miami and look at this. Another low total here and very low projected run totals for both teams, both sitting at 3.5. It's Logan Webb on the mound, and then Pablo Lopez is going to be a big spend up option across the board. So let's start really, if we look at both of these guys on where we have for our top 2 pitchers, let's just start with Lopez, only because he is the highest cost guy on DK. Now, you have a little positive leverage as well, but that cost, that price alone is a lot.
Yeah, a couple $100 above Dylan Cease. He's pretty good. Pretty good. 99 pitches his last outing. He's gone high 90s a few times in his last 5. And his best environment for pitching, really, if you even go back to last year, he loves pitching in Lone Depot Park. So this is a good spot for him. I think he's pitched to almost a 30% K rate at the house the last 2 years. The Giants don't really give you 30% upside, but they, as we saw yesterday, they can still give a decent game to Pablo. I don't think that the massive ceiling in terms of strikeout rates is probably going to be realized more often than not against this version of the Giants lineup, but I still think it's a solid spot for Lopez to get through a solid game, maybe 6-7 innings. He is holding on to a 49% ground ball rate to lefties with just a 178 batting average allowed. And this Giants lineup is only offering 3 righties, and they're pretty split up. So he can maybe neutralize guys like Listella and Jock Peterson, guys like that with that ground ball rate. So I do think he has a good chance to hold these Giants at bay. He's one of my premier options that I'm targeting. And because Dylan Cease is getting so much attention, Lopez is not. And Lopez, inherent or because of that, is getting an opportunity at positive leverage on DK. And then, I can get up to 20% and not feel like I'm making a bad move here. So I'm in on Lopez. I'm modest about his strikeout returns here, but I also just think it's a decent spot in a lineup that I think he can get through as long as he's throwing strikes, and he doesn't have walk problems with lefties. So if you're not going to strike out these lefties and they're just going to keep grounding out, that's going to give you a better chance to go deeper into games as well.
Is this, and I know we still have a couple of guys on the slate, more so like Gore, who's going to be that higher price guy, but it sounds like if you are going down that strategy of trying to stay away from so much of the field getting to Cease, this would be the easiest pivot, especially because you're spending up where a lot of people would, if they are logically staying away from Cease, they may look at Gore, they may look at Webb, they may even look at McKenzie to save some money. But I love your strategy here, which is you're taking advantage of the neglected Lopez, even though you're only spending $200 more. So it makes a lot of sense, man. Same on FanDuel, by the way.
Yeah, the only thing you wish you felt better about the strikeouts, but the run prevention is so good that 7 innings and maybe he gets a strikeout per inning. I think it makes a lot of sense to use him as a pivot, and you're not holding hands with as many people.
All right, let's move. Oh, no, Webb. Sorry. I don't want to blow past Logan Webb here by any means. 8,500, so a little bit more workable. You're losing a lot of leverage, though, to the field because of the matchup and the cost.
Yeah, strikeouts project a little bit better against this version of the Marlins lineup. Chisholm, Cooper, Soler, Evie Garcia, Jesus Sanchez, all those guys strike out an aggregate of like 1 and 4. So it's a good spot for Logan Webb to maybe pick up some Ks. The thing with Logan Webb, though, is his strikeout rate has not been the same that it was last year. And we've got 61 innings of sample size here to kind of make us be like, okay, something's different. His strikeout overall K rate last year was 26.5%. This year is just 20%. So that has definitely declined, going the wrong way. And a lot of that is against lefties. Last year, that K rate to lefties 22.5%. This year, just 16.8%. And it has also dropped about 8% against righties too. So his declining K rate, kind of like Pablo, makes me a little bit more pessimistic about the strikeout returns that he can have. But with all that said, much like Pablo Lopez, he is sustaining a pretty decent ground ball rate. So if he's going to keep the ball on the ground, and we know this park can suppress homers anyway, if they did, leak some fly balls, I think he can eat some innings in at 8,500 on DraftKings. It makes sense for him to also go, 5, 6, 7, and maybe you get a strikeout per inning for him because of some of the elevated K rates on the other side. But there's definitely some stuff to watch if you're taking notes on K rates for both guys or K potential. Webb is, to his credit, coming off a 10K game, but he also allowed 3 bombs in that game. So I like Webb at 8,500. I'm a little less happy about him on FanDuel, just looking at the price. But when we start talking ownership, and then we put some of those declining numbers versus the negative leverage, that makes me a little bit more spooked.
So this is going to be interesting now, looking at how much you're trying to get to Lopez on the flip side with San Fran, and maybe there's a little bit insurance as kind of a theme that you've talked about, getting to some of the Giants bats as a result of that. Then there's also Miami, who, again, Similar to Tampa, Oakland, we have just projected so low. Maybe you can come up with some countering to the field with Webb, although he's kind of in that Pavetta range, not even that Cease or Ashby range.
Yeah, Pavetta's a good comp. I think so. With some of these pitchers, I want to bet on progression and those numbers starting to fall. I guess I would say to Logan Webb's credit, his strength of schedule has been pretty rough. At Philly, the Mets have been pretty good, Coors, and then a couple games against St. Louis, and they've been pretty good at making contact. So yeah, it's okay to believe that strikeouts are on the way because his swing and strike rate is still 11%. So yeah, he's kind of in that Pavetta range for me, and I think he's a little less likely to waste pitches. He has just an 8% walk rate to lefties, 3% to righties. So Pavetta's a good comp. I think I'd be more inclined to land on Logan Webb here, just because we're getting a lot or less ownership, and it's a pretty good park boost. And even if he's not striking out, there's a lot of ground balls involved here. So I like him a little bit more than Pavetta.
As far as the stacks with Miami, are you getting them?
Oh, I thought you were asking like
no. You're right, and you're right. Honestly, it was a good miscommunication because you broke down something further that made a lot more sense, because I think people are looking at Webb and Pavetta as comps based on where we have them. So no, it wasn't even like a different question. That was perfect that you broke that down, because I think people would be looking at that. Now they have some advantage that you laid out. With that said, what about the Miami stack?
Yeah, Miami. So unlike the Athletics, Miami can produce. They have Chisholm at the top of the lineup. He's really good. I mean, the main pushback here is Logan Webb was one of the most impressive pitchers in baseball last year, and to pick on him today, you got to put 5,800 on Jazz Chisholm's name. You got to put 6K on Jorge Soler. Like these guys are not in Coors. What is going on here? So because of that, we're also not only seeing no ownership there. We're getting a 1.4% ownership share on that stack. Maybe that makes them, if you dedicate 5%, I think inherently Chisholm is a guy with a great DFS ceiling worth chasing. And then Soler, Aguilar, Avi Garcia, Jesus Sanchez, all guys with a 180 plus to 200 plus ISO to righties in the last couple of years. They have enough talent spread out, unlike the Athletics, to where they can play spoiler even in a rough park. It just, we're dealing with a lot of ground ball pitchers and a ridiculous price range for 1 through 4.
All right, let's move right. I see all this concern about Kansas City. It looks to be, I'm just on the Weather Channel now. So it looks to be light. You know how it has that range, right? It hasn't even hit moderate at 4:00 Eastern time yet. So there is light rain. There is some rain, I guess, expected. But the thunderstorms don't look to be coming until tomorrow or maybe tonight. So I don't know how much that is going to impact. A little rain could impact. I get it. But I just wanted to clarify that. It doesn't look like there's a tornado or something imminent happening in, the next 20 minutes at least.
Yeah, I don't like to play weatherman. One of the things I would say is that since this is an afternoon game, they have a bigger window to wait and get the game in. So because of that, I would kind of lean more so that like that's an outcome. I hate trying to pretend to play weatherman. I just lean on the pros. So my read is that there's a good chance that they can play through a little bit of rain or wait around and it gets dry later. If this was like a 7 p.m. start or 8 p.m. start, something like that, then I'd be a little bit more scared. But it's 3:00 in the afternoon, right? Yeah,
depending on where you are, right? 4 for me. And Devin Neiman, 5 miles from Kaufman. It's not even sprinkling. See?
There you go.
Told you. Well, everybody's getting nervous for nothing. That's all. All right, let's move on then. So this game here, the rain is an element that technically we're just going to have to deal with in the backdrop, right? With that said, let's start, I guess, with the pitching matchup between the two, and knowing that there could be, I guess, in the back, some sense of a delay here, even if they start the game and there is a delay. I'm not saying that's imminent either, Gun, right? I'm just saying it's probably something that you want to at least pay attention to.
Yeah, but I mean, you take the plunge or you don't. We all know that it could rain. If and we're getting close to, if they tell us that it's delayed, then we have a little bit more to play with here. But just the matchup is really pristine here, so it's one of those I would hate to not have access to the Astros, and maybe the threat of rain will keep their ownership at bay. Right now, I love that it's 1-1 between top stack and ownership because I can get there and I like them quite a bit.
It's delayed, by the way.
It is delayed. Okay,
yeah.
So
we can move on. Tarp's on the field, right?
Yeah, I mean, but if there's a window later that opens up, then I think they could play.
All right, so let's assume real quick for the purposes of that, it's delayed. It opens up. There's a window, as you mentioned. Good point about this being a 4:00 Eastern start here. So this picks back up in, I don't know, an hour and 20 minutes, what have you. Mm-hmm. Does that change anything for what you were looking at before we even got a weather alert?
No, as long as it's the same pitchers. I would imagine the pitchers didn't start their warm-ups or anything like that. I'm just guessing that they held him at bay. So sometimes if a pitcher goes out there and warms up and then he's on the mound and they pull out the tarp or something, that could dead arm somebody. But even I don't think we're that enthralled with pitching here. We just want to pick on Bubic and I don't think that
doesn't change, right?
No,
I mean, they're the top stack for a reason. You mentioned picking on Bubic on the Royals here, and even their leverage score isn't ridiculously bad to work with.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. 1-1 top stack versus ownership. And, I'm willing to be at 25% on Houston. I might bring that down now to 20. It's just, maybe I should look at this radar, but it's so hard to see a game at, 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., whatever it is in KC get called in the middle of the afternoon unless they know it's going to rain nonstop for 10 hours. It
does look like the rain is steady, and I'm just repeating what I'm reading. So this is not me in my meteorologist degree, but it does look like there is steady rain. It just didn't look like there was more than moderate rain, if that made sense. Yeah. So I don't know. A sprinkle is clearly enough to delay here, and you're right though. That's a good point where if this were just passing through at 3:00, 4:00 Eastern, depending on, where you are, there probably isn't that much of a delay, if anything, right?
I mean, we're guessing what humans are doing and on the ground, man. I don't know what their policy is.
That's fine.
Some teams will just play through it.
I'm just going with what here. Here they make you play through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's Philly and nobody wants to do anything else. So do you want to just move on then with this in delay?
Yeah, we're here really short on time. Maybe.
Yeah, we have 7 minutes for 2 games. Okay. We'll knock it down.
All right, cool.
Cincinnati. All right. Washington at Cincy. Higher total for this game here. So last 2 games for us as we kind of wind down here. Molly on the mound there for, Cincy, if you wanted to look at that versus both of these stacks, mind you, and that's probably the big thing to look at. Both of these stacks are super high projected, and they have super high as far as team totals compared to the majority of the rest of the field. So that's kind of what you're working around with these 2 pitchers.
Yeah, Eric Fetty is definitely somebody your eyes light up when he's on the bump, and this is a super plus park, Great American Ballpark. So I definitely understand why everyone wants to be here. I want to be there. At the end of the day, we still, Cincinnati Reds don't project as one of the best plays or best teams in the league. So whenever they become one of the highest owned teams, you're just like, man, am I really going to hold hands with the world and stacking the worst team in baseball, essentially? But bad hitting can beat bad pitching, especially in a great hitting environment. And it feels like once a year, Joey Votto wakes up and has this ridiculous stretch. And I don't know if you've seen the last, 3 or 4 games, man, he might be awake. Also Tommy Pham, being back in the lineup, I think he got one over the fence yesterday. So maybe there's a little bit more talent than the perception here, but you don't need to do much to sell me on the ability to get to Eric Fetty. So I'm there, and I would say maybe if people are jumping off the Astros ship here, maybe they're increasing their Reds exposure. So that kind of scares me because they're still the Reds. But it makes a lot of sense to be here. This is just a really good park and a really good matchup against Fetty for the Reds.
Same thing for Washington, though.
Not
There's still a pretty high projected stack here.
Yeah. So Washington is Oh, I'll say this. I have more respect for Molly as a pitcher than I do for Fetty.
Okay.
Although, Molly has definitely struggled this year. There are still some redeeming qualities in his makeup, like a 25% overall K rate, 27% to righties. Where he's really, really regressed and had problems is against lefties. He's got a almost 5x whip against lefties so far. His K rate has dropped 8% from last year to this year to lefties, and inversely his walk rate has increased 6% to lefties. So he's dealing with like a 15% walk rate to lefties. So unfortunately for him, Juan Soto is batting from the left side. He's pretty doggone good at the baseballs, and so is Josh Bell. So I think those two guys look pretty good against him. And then Lane Thomas. Did you watch sports yesterday? Did you watch baseball yesterday?
Yeah. I wasn't just watching the Phillies, I promise you. Yes.
So the Nats didn't make the main slate, so it's easy to miss this. Yep. Lane Thomas hit 3 homers yesterday. It's amazing. It's ridiculous. But that's a product of Great American Ballpark, and then it gets rewarded with the 2-hole here. So if you if you believe in hot streaks, you hit 3 homers and now you got Juan Soto on deck to protect you. Hey man, maybe you can stay hot here. So it makes a lot of sense to be on the Nats. I do think the Nats have a tougher matchup than the Reds do, but I also think the Nats are probably a little bit more talented, especially in their like 1 through 5 than the Reds are.
Okay, it makes sense. Definitely makes sense, especially as you lay out there with the 2 pitchers and working more the stacks. What's that? Sorry.
No, yeah, I'm with you there. As far as the pitchers go, I wouldn't have any Fetty. There's maybe a light range of outcomes for Molly to surprise us here. Like I said, there's still some strikeout acumen in his pitching DNA. So maybe some shares of him in mass fields, but I'm out on Fetty.
All right, let's look at this last game. Final couple of minutes here for us. And again, looking at it from a stacked standpoint first, these are 2 stacks that are projected to be in that lower tier, lower third, if you will, of this 9-game slate. You do have Gore and Ashby on the mound. We've referenced them a couple of times in response to some other guys. So is this a pitching slate or a pitching game for you or a hitting game for you?
More of a pitching game. I think with Mackenzie Gore, he's starting to live up to the hype. I think his ERA has obviously been outperforming his like expected ERA, Sierra, stuff like that. There's a little bit of regression coming, but man, that strikeout stuff is real. He's got to hone down the walks to lefties, but the Brewers are not going to throw but just 3 lefties at him. So I like him a lot. I like his 30% K rate a lot in this spot. And then inversely, Aaron Ashby's also been dealing with like a 30% K rate. So looks like a good chance for a pitcher's duel. Hey, maybe some NRFI action too.
Yeah, you like that? Let me see here. I by the way, I had to bail on that Sox Tampa call. I mean, it's like a 6.5% hold that I'm betting into. So screw that. But this one here, you piqued my interest. So Padres Brewers, you like the first inning?
I mean, I think it's 2 good pitchers, and that's usually my favorite time to attack NRFIs is when you got 2 good pitchers.
The hold is better than the other one. I'll give you that. So you're down to about 5.5%. All right. I trust your analysis to bet into that hold. How about that? And I won't even blame you if the bet doesn't hit.
When McCutcheon homers, don't at me.
Well, actually, I might go yes. No, you're right. No is the way to go here. All right. Anything else that you want to? Again, I mean, talking about both pitchers here, there is a little bit difference. Clearly, is what we've referenced compared to the slate, but. Gore's going to be that spend up option. Ashby going to be that lower cost. You talked about getting to them, and it's really more of a pitching matchup here than a hitting matchup. So I don't know if there are mini stacks, one-offs, or anything that you would look at on offense before we get out of here.
I mean, if I was getting any bats,
by any means.
We're just betting on talent. Manny Machado can homer off anyone. He homered off of Burns yesterday, so he's somebody that especially for NRFI, I'd be sweating him. So he would be, we start cherry picking there. Stack wise, I'm pretty lukewarm on anything here, and then on the Brewer side, maybe some Tyrone Taylor as a guy with a decent hit tool, as my boy Terry would say. That profile is okay against lefties, but I'm not really that enthralled with the onslaught stacks.
All right. Well, we can't end on 8 games super chat. That's for damn sure. But we appreciate you 8 game big time and the $8 you throw at us. Jeff Williams, real quick on the way out, make Jeff Williams happy, Gundacker. Send him into the weekend happy. Huff or Raleigh, last man in on DK.
Oh my God. Jesus H. I guess
I think it's LMI for a reason.
Probably Huff is batting fifth and Raleigh's batting ninth, right? So Huff has a little bit better of an RBI spot.
All right, good stuff. There you have it. At Gundacker on Twitter, at Shander Show for me. Thanks to Tyler. Look, hit that thumbs up button. You've been hanging with us. You haven't? Subscribe as well. We appreciate everybody rolling with us. Again, a lot of things happening tonight with MMA, so make sure you use all of our free tools available for you and main slate ownership projections, pro plays for UFC. We'll see you.